Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. You're not coming back. That's what I said. No yelling. No dramatic pause. Just 5 words that came out of my mouth before I even understood what they meant. And then she left. She actually left. She didn't slam the door. That would have at least felt passionate. No. She pulled it shut softly, like she was leaving a hotel room, like she didn't plan on returning, like she hadn't just ended 17 years of marriage with a hair flip and a shrug. The door was still swinging when I sat down on the bottom stair. I remember the absurdest thing. I could still smell the cinnamon gum she always chewed when she was nervous. And I knew it wasn't the first time she'd walked out on me. It was just the first time I saw it happen in real time. 5 hours earlier, I was refilling the salt shaker when she asked, "Do you mind if I go out for a bit?" I said, "With who?" She didn't answer, just smiled like she knew something I didn't. I wish I could say I got suspicious right then, but I didn't. I just said, "Be careful," because that's what husbands like me do. We don't fight. We don't accuse. We just hope. And when she walked back into the living room wearing that red sweater she only wore twice a year, once on our anniversary, once for her office parties, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I stood up. I didn't plan to. My knees just sort of moved. And I said it, "Go ahead. But the moment you walk out that door, our marriage is over. You're not coming back." She looked at me like I just quoted a bad movie, tilted her head, gave me a bored smile, and left. Just like that. I stared at the wall for a while. Then I opened her laptop. She never logged out of anything. First, I saw an email draft to someone named R. Then came the rideshare history, not to a restaurant, not to a friend's house, to a cabin I didn't know existed. And finally, the text, timestamped just minutes before I spoke. It said, "He'll either say nothing or he'll pretend to be brave. Either way, I'm gone." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept rereading that sentence until the letters blurred. That's how it began. With gum, a red sweater, and a door that never closed the way it used to. I sat in that silence for what felt like hours. But the wall clock told me it had only been 16 minutes. 16 minutes since she walked out. Since my voice betrayed me by saying something final. I don't even know where the words came from. They didn't feel like mine. They felt like the version of me I've buried for years. The one who notices red flags and actually does something about them. I didn't move for a while. Just sat there listening to the house breathe. The ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the radiator pipes knocking like distant memories. And then, my phone lit up. A ping. Not a text. An alert from an app one had forgotten I even installed. 6 weeks ago, I had put a cheap Bluetooth tracker in the sole of her gym bag. She never used it for the gym. It became her overnight bag. She said it was for work trips, though I never saw any plane tickets or business cards. I told myself I was paranoid, insecure, that I was becoming one of those men who read too many online horror stories and think every late return is betrayal. But I never removed the tracker. And now, there it was, glowing on my screen, pulsing like a heartbeat. She was heading west. Not to her sister's, not to her job's fake conference in the city, but to an address I'd never seen in her contacts. Some small place out near Lake Benning. No hotels there. Just vacation homes and cabins people used to disappear for a while. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just grabbed my jacket, keys, and the folder I had quietly been building for months. Printed screenshots, bank transfers, photos. Not confrontation material. Just confirmation. A diary of everything I refused to say out loud. Halfway to the car, I stopped. There was a sock on the front lawn. Hers. One of those mismatched colorful ones she always wore around the house. The wind must have blown it out of her overnight bag. I picked it up and held it for a second longer than I should have. Then I tossed it in the trash. Driving to the location felt like floating. I couldn't feel my hands on the steering wheel. Just this numb pressure in my chest that got heavier every mile closer. The streets became rural. The air darker. The GPS buzzed one last time before saying, "You've arrived at your destination." And there it was. A cabin tucked between trees like it didn't want to be found. A silver car out front that wasn't hers. Music playing inside. Light laughter. Her laugh. I parked the car but didn't get out. Couldn't. My body refused to move. I sat there with the engine off, windows up, breathing shallow. I watched her shadow dance across the curtains. Her silhouette moving close to another figure. Not just close. Intimate. This wasn't a maybe. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was exactly what I had feared. And still, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just whispered to myself, "You said it. You told her not to come back." But here's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't explode. It leaks. And that cabin? That was just the first drop. I sat in my car outside that cabin for almost 30 minutes, and in all that time, not once did she check her phone. Not once did she glance outside. She wasn't worried. She wasn't hiding. She had already moved into a new reality where I didn't exist, and that stung more than any message I'd found or lie she'd told. This wasn't a slip-up. It wasn't some emotional affair that spiraled. This was calculated, comfortable, casual, even. She had a second life, and I was nothing but background noise in it. Eventually, the front door opened. The man stepped out first. He was younger than me, leaner, wearing one of those smug expressions like the world owed him a standing ovation. He stretched like he owned the sky, then lit a cigarette and leaned against the railing. A minute later, Darla followed him out. She was barefoot, holding a half-empty wine glass, her laugh echoing across the clearing. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language said everything. She was touching his arm, leaning in, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. She kissed him, and that's when I finally got out of the car. I didn't march up and confront them. I wasn't ready to blow it all up. Instead, I quietly stepped into the trees just beyond the clearing and watched from there. Call me a coward, fine. But I wanted to see who she really was when she thought I wasn't watching. She was glowing. That's the part that broke me. She looked free, like a burden had been lifted from her chest and dropped straight onto mine. I realized then that she hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She'd grown to resent the version of herself that existed beside me. The quiet dinners, the mortgage, the slow, dependable rhythm of our life. She was chasing something reckless now, something louder than me. After a few more minutes, they went back inside. The door closed, lights dimmed, and I was left with nothing but my heartbeat and the cold. I drove home in silence. No music, no thoughts, just one phrase looping in my head. "You're not coming back." I had said it like a challenge, but now it felt like a prophecy. One I had spoken into reality without knowing its full weight. When I got home, her drawer was open, clothes missing, a few hangers swinging gently in the closet like they knew something was wrong. She had packed while I was in the shower earlier that day. Her toothbrush was gone, her favorite blanket, even the Polaroid from our trip to Vermont, the one where we looked genuinely happy. The house was no longer a home. It was a crime scene of emotional abandonment. And I just stood there in the hallway, holding that sock I'd rescued from the lawn earlier, realizing it was the last thing she'd ever left behind. Not on purpose, not sentimental, just forgotten. But me, I remembered everything. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in the dark, blinking at the ceiling like it owed me answers. Every sound in the house felt louder than usual. The hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of settling wood, even the wind against the windows. But the loudest thing of all was the silence from her side of the bed. That hollow emptiness next to me where she used to curl up, legs always freezing cold, toes digging into my calves. I used to grumble about it. Now I missed it so badly it made me sick. I spent hours wondering if she'd come back, half expecting to hear the key turn in the front door, her steps on the hardwood, the usual explanation wrapped in a calm lie. But the door never opened. Morning came, gray and slow, and I realized she really meant it. She was gone. I meant what I said too, that if she walked out, she wouldn't come back. But somehow it still felt like I'd lost a game I didn't know I was playing. Around 6 a.m., I remembered the envelope. 2 weeks earlier, a plain white envelope had arrived in our mailbox. No return address. Inside, just a single printed photo. Darla, in that same red sweater, leaning over the same man from the cabin, laughing, holding his hand at some restaurant I didn't recognize. No message. No signature. Just a moment, frozen on glossy paper, shoved into my reality like a cruel whisper. Back then, I had confronted her. She played it cool, of course. Said it was Photoshop, that it was old, that it was someone who looked like her. I wanted to believe her so badly I almost convinced myself it wasn't her. But I kept the envelope, stuffed it in the drawer where I keep batteries and expired coupons. I didn't want to face it. Not then. But now I took it out. And this time I noticed something I had missed. There was another slip of paper, tucked deep in the envelope's crease. A small, folded post-it note. I hadn't even realized it was in there. All it said was, Cabin 9B, Lake Benning. He brings all of them there. My stomach dropped. All of them? She wasn't just cheating. She was being cheated on too. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, holding the note, and for a brief second, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt humiliated. Not because she had done this to me, but because she had thrown her entire life away for someone who didn't even see her as the only one. Couldn't eat. Couldn't think. I just stood there in a daze until my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You deserve better. I didn't know she was married. I'm sorry. No name. No context. Just that. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for accidentally ruining my life? Appreciate the apology. Want to split the bills she left behind? Instead, I stared at the message until my vision blurred. That's when I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I was done waiting. I was done wondering. And I was done letting her write the end of this story. It was time for her to come home, not to explain, not to fix it, just to see what happens when the man she underestimated stops sitting quietly in the background. I thought about burning her things. For a brief, almost cinematic moment, I imagined standing in the backyard tossing in her journals, her scarves, that framed art print she loved more than any photo of us. But I didn't. Not because I was the bigger person. Not because I wanted to preserve anything. But because I knew her well enough to understand what would actually get under her skin. She liked chaos. I would give her structure. She left everything in a whirlwind. I'd reduce her entire existence to neatly packed, labeled boxes, stacked like evidence of her choices. I started with the closet. Her sides smelled like vanilla and guilt. I pulled each dress off the hanger slowly, remembering where she wore each one. The green one from our anniversary in Charleston. The blue one she said made her feel like a movie star. The black one I now realized she only wore when she went to girls' nights, that somehow never had any photos. I folded them all mechanically, no anger left, just a dull ache that settled behind my ribs and refused to budge. Her jewelry went into a shoebox, her books into a crate. Every time I packed something, I felt like I was removing a tumor. One that had lived beside me for years, smiling at me over dinner while bleeding me dry emotionally. I found a note she'd written, probably never meant for me to see. It was tucked inside an old cookbook of all places, a place she knew I'd never touch. It read, Curtis will never leave me. That's what makes it easier. I had to sit down after that one. It wasn't cruel. It was casual, like I was furniture. A reliable old chair she never planned to throw out because it still held weight and didn't squeak. But I was squeaking now, loudly, and I was done holding her weight. I called her mother, told her Darla had left, told her I'd be dropping off a few boxes in case she wanted to help store the past. Her mother didn't sound surprised, just disappointed, but not in me. I think she knew. I think she always did. There had been moments when her eyes lingered on mine too long, like she wanted to say something but couldn't betray her daughter. When I drove over with the first 2 boxes, her mom didn't say a word. She just opened the garage, pointed to a dusty corner, and nodded. No, what happened? No, are you okay? Just acceptance. That silence was louder than any accusation. Back home, I opened her last drawer. Inside was a photograph of us, early years when everything felt permanent. We were on the couch, laughing. I had a mustard stain on my shirt, and she was pointing at it like it was the funniest thing in the world. I almost smiled. Almost. But then I saw what was scribbled on the back. In her handwriting, "He'll never be enough, but he'll always be there." I placed the photo on top of her final box. No frame, no glass, just paper exposed and fading. Then I sealed it. That night, I left all 7 boxes stacked neatly by the door, waiting like soldiers. I wrote a note and taped it on the top one. It said, "Everything you didn't take with you, including the truth." I went to bed early. For the first time in weeks, I didn't check my phone. Didn't wonder where she was. I just stared at the ceiling again. But this time, it didn't feel like it owed me answers. I had them now. All of them. And tomorrow I would make one last stop, to someone who knew more about Jaden than I did. The man who left that envelope in my mailbox. I didn't expect him to open the door. I thought I'd knock once, maybe twice, and leave the manila envelope on his doorstep with a note that said something poetic and pathetic like, "You can have her, just know what you're keeping." But when the door creaked open, and I found myself face to face with the man from the photograph, the one whose hand she held, the one whose name I now knew was Reed, I froze. He looked surprised but not alarmed. Maybe because I looked too drained to be a threat. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't shaking. I was just there. A hollowed-out version of the man she used to call her husband. He stepped outside, closed the door behind him, and said quietly, "Curtis!" Hearing my name in his voice was surreal. It felt like being recognized in a world I didn't belong to. "I figured you'd come eventually," he added. "Didn't think it'd take this long." I wanted to hit him. I wanted to ask him if he liked the way she kissed. If he laughed when she told him the same stories she once told me. If she used that voice, the soft one, the one she saved for apologies and seductions. But I didn't. I handed him the envelope, the same one with the photo and the note about Cabin 9B, and waited. He opened it. He didn't flinch. He didn't pretend to be shocked. He just sighed, like he'd seen too many versions of the same mess before. "She wasn't honest with me either," he said after a moment. "I didn't know she was married until after the first time. By then, it was already complicated." "Then why keep going?" I asked, my voice flatter than I expected. "Why not end it?" "Because I'm an idiot," he said without hesitation. "And because she's really good at making you believe you're the only one she's telling the truth to." He wasn't defending her. He was confessing. And somehow that was worse. I didn't want him to be self-aware. I wanted him to be a reckless, selfish cliché. But he looked just as gutted as I felt. "She told me you were her brother once," he admitted, laughing bitterly. "That you were crashing at her place after a divorce." I blinked. "She lied to both of us." He nodded. "Multiple times. To be honest, I don't think I was the only one she brought to that cabin either. I should have been numb by now. I thought I was. But hearing it confirmed the reality that I wasn't just betrayed, I was one of many betrayed. Added a new layer of humiliation I didn't know existed. I turned to leave. "Curtis," he called after me. "She'll come back. They always come back when they think you're finally healing. Don't let her in." I didn't reply. Couldn't. I got in my car and drove until my gas light came on. Parked by a gas station and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to earth. That night I changed the locks. Not out of anger. Not out of fear. But because deep down I knew he was right. She would come back. And I had to be ready when she did. It was exactly 4 days later. I remember because I just started making real meals again, nothing impressive, but I'd graduated from frozen pizza to actual pasta with sauce from a jar. I even did the dishes without letting them sit in the sink overnight. That night, the house was quiet, peaceful in a way that felt strange, like I'd stolen it from someone else's life. And then I heard the lock click. At first, I thought it was the wind or maybe my imagination replaying old sounds. But no, it was her, Darla. She walked in without knocking, without hesitation, as if the locks hadn't changed and nothing had happened. She stood in the doorway holding a coffee like she'd just come back from the store, like the last week didn't exist. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, waiting for the apology, the excuse, the tears, but none of it came. Instead, she smiled and said, "I figured you'd cool off by now." That sentence hit harder than anything she'd ever thrown at me. It wasn't just arrogant, it was entitled. She had walked out, cheated, lied, disappeared, and yet she genuinely believed she still had a place in this house, that she could slide back in like nothing had fractured. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just said, "How did you get in?" She looked around, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I changed the locks." She held up a key. "You forgot about the garage." Of course I had. The damn garage door opener I never use. She still had the clicker in her car. My heart sank for a second, not because she got in, but because it meant she never even considered that she shouldn't. She walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out the juice like this was still her home. I watched her in disbelief. "I boxed up your stuff," I said finally. "It's in the garage. You can take it and go." She laughed. "Curtis, stop being dramatic. You're not built for drama." I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my fist on the table and demand how she could be so cold, so disconnected. But instead, I said the one thing I knew she wouldn't expect. "I know about the others." That stopped her. She turned, her smile twitching at the corners. "What others?" I held up my phone and showed her the message. The one from Reed. The one that confirmed she wasn't just cheating. She was recycling the same story with multiple people. The same cabin. The same lies. The same performance. She didn't deny it. She just shrugged, like it was beneath her to explain. "You left," I said, stepping toward her. "And I told you what that meant. You're not coming back." Her face finally shifted, not to sadness, to confusion, like she couldn't comprehend the idea that I was serious, that I wasn't going to chase her this time. "I needed space," she muttered. "And you're acting like I committed a crime." "You didn't need space," I said, my voice finally rising. "You needed an audience, and I'm done being one." She stood there in silence, for the first time truly speechless. And then she did something that shattered whatever was left of my tolerance. She rolled her eyes and walked past me toward the living room, like she was still deciding whether to stay. I blocked the doorway. "Take your things and go, Darla. This isn't your house anymore." "You're being ridiculous." "No, I'm finally being honest." She stared at me for a long, long time, and then, without a word, she turned around and walked out through the same door she'd barged in. This time, she didn't leave anything behind. But I knew she wasn't done yet. After she left the second time, something strange happened. Nothing. No messages. No phone calls. No tears. Just silence. And instead of feeling abandoned, I felt relieved. I didn't have to rehearse comebacks or wait for closure anymore. The story had written itself. And now, for the first time in years, I was holding the pen. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not friends, not family. I wanted to sit in it alone, to figure out who I was without her orbiting every corner of my life. The truth is, I hadn't heard my own thoughts clearly in a long time. My mind had been a crowded hallway of her excuses and my doubts. But now it was quiet, peaceful, mine. The day after she left, I took down the last photo of us that still hung in the hallway. I replaced it with a mirror. It wasn't poetic. It just felt right. I wanted to walk past my own reflection and remember who'd been here the whole time, me. The guy she underestimated. The guy she thought would wait around forever. 2 weeks later, I donated half of her things. Gave away the boxes she didn't bother to come back for. I even sold the couch she insisted on, the one that cost a fortune but was never comfortable. That sale paid for a short solo trip to the mountains. No plans. No company. Just me, a notebook, and the kind of silence that heals instead of hurts. People say healing is loud, dramatic, filled with reinvention. But mine was soft. It was cleaning the kitchen because I wanted to. It was sleeping through the night without bracing for lies. It was grocery shopping without wondering if I needed to pick up her favorite snacks. Small, quiet victories. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was hers. Inside was a short note. You meant more to me than I knew how to show. I'm sorry I figured that out too late. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I just folded the letter, placed it in the same drawer where I used to keep batteries and expired coupons, and left it there, like a forgotten item in a life I no longer lived. Now, I'm writing this not because I want revenge or pity, but because I survived it. And if you're sitting in silence right now, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone could walk out of your life like you were just a phase, hear me when I say you'll be okay. Better even. Not because they left, but because you stayed. You stayed long enough to grow stronger. You stayed long enough to find out who you really are without their shadow in the room. Thanks for following this journey here on Reddit Confessions. Now it's your turn. What's one small moment in history, personal or global, that changed everything in an instant? Drop it in the comments. Let's talk about the turning points we never saw coming.